Phenomenology and psychoanalysis. You know, ology means study of phenomenon. I don't want to make a big deal of it. You'll hear this word thrown around a lot. People use the word phenomenon. Phenomena are those things that are given to us in our senses. That was a philosophical word, given to all of those things. The study of what we know, and whether what we know is something out there or whether it is all our own invention. Does that make sense? There's, a lot of people say, well, if there's a world outside of our minds, outside of our sensations and feelings, well, it might be out there, but we have no way of knowing it. All we know is what is given to us through our senses. Those things that are given to us through our senses, they came to call phenomena. Okay? And the study of that is called phenomenology. Phenomenology in philosophy became a study of the mind, of knowing, of what we can know, of the things that are given to us in our senses. But there was another trend that came after this, and it was called psychoanalysis. Psychoanalysis says that to know what people know, or what people think they know, you have to study their consciousness, their mind, their conscious and unconscious mind. This is normally associated with Sigmund Freud. Psychoanalysis, but it's gone further. A lot of thinkers who study black literature, such as Hortense Spillers, uses forms of psychoanalysis to investigate characters. And if you study black literature, you talk about black characters. For example, you take Toni Morrison's Beloved. The principal character is Sethe. Sethe killed her child. For Morrison and for Spillers, who analyzes Morrison, this is a study in psychoanalysis. I don't care how you use it. You could talk about Sethe's unconsciousness, her lack of memory, for instance, of her mother not speaking English, of her mother killing all of her children except Sethe. And the reason she kept Sethe, because Sethe was the only one whose father was black. Or baby Suggs, who had 8 children by 6 different men, breeding and so on and so forth. For Spillers, this becomes a study of psychoanalysis. Now, if we'll go quickly. The essay by Spillers is entitled Mama's Baby, Papa's Maybe, an American Grammar Book. She uses the word grammar as grammar are rules. You see what I'm saying? So if she talks about an American grammar book, she's using it in a really lot of meanings here. But what she's saying is, she's talking the black experience, where our genealogies are traced through our mothers. Because we always could know who our mothers were, it was not always certain who one's father was. Now, and an American grammar book is her way of saying the American rule book, the American playbook. Now, I'm going to go quick. Patriarchy. Patriarchy refers to institutions. Misogyny refers to ideology. Is that fair? Would you agree with that? Why can I go that way? In other words, the institutions which subjugate and enforce female inequality and male supremacy are what we call patriarchal institutions. Now, how did these institutions come about? I think the landmark study of this is by a man by the name of Frederick Engels, and I will just give you the title that tells you everything. The Origins of the Family, Private Property, and the State. It's not on the reading list, but you might wish to read it. His argument is that the modern family, that is the family under capitalism, is connected to the rise of private property and the state. That the head of the family, ideally, is, as we say, quote, the breadwinner or the property owner. For most of the history of societies, since women have not been able to own property. A legitimate child is a child who has his father's name, or so that property can legitimately be transferred to him. That is the origin under capitalism, but certainly probably under feudalism and under other systems of private property which privilege men. However, and this is Spiller's study, the black woman and man in the face of white patriarchy and white capitalism. Now, and this is what, and so Spiller studies literature in the ways that a social scientist studies reality. She takes a novel and doesn't just read the story, but she analyzes and contextualizes and critiques these characters by looking at them as representatives of actual black life. Does that make sense? And of course, when you read Morrison, when you read Baldwin, you are literally reading iconic characters. Or when you read Richard Wright, Bigger Thomas, how much alive is he today? Has he ever died? You know, etc. But she studies them this way. But in the instance of patriarchy, and next week we'll go more into the essay, what Spillers does is to both study the psychological or psychoanalytic foundations of patriarchy as well as the social, economic, and racial foundations of patriarchy. Now, I have extended Spillers on these two grounds. One, patriarchy, and here we're talking about in the black community, because the institutions of patriarchy, although not self-generated, they do not come from the black experience. They are the white patriarchy imposed in the black community. Okay? But the question is, patriarchy in the face of the diminished male. You know, patriarchy logically assumes the strong male, the privileging of a man. You know what I'm saying? You take in the white world, and of course we live in parallel universes. The white world and the black world are different often as day and night. But in the white world, patriarchy generally privileges white men. It privileges white men over most white women. It privileges white men over black women. It privileges white men over black men. Okay?
Absolutely.
However, patriarchy, that does not privilege black men. In fact, it diminishes black men. Okay? Now, this leads to the conclusion, as far as I'm concerned, or the observation, that the patriarchy that we're talking about was not generated from the black, self-emergent or self-generated in the black community. It is not black capitalism, black private property ownership, black strong males, or black institutions that produce patriarchy. If that were the case, it seems to me that black men, let's say since after slavery, say for the 150 years or whatever, black men would have been in a stronger position vis-a-vis white women and black women, and would be in a competitive situation for privilege with white men. However, what we have witnessed is what we saw in slavery: a diminished black male. And now today, even though you could go, you said, well, in the 60s you saw, well, black power, black men, and black leaders and all this type of thing. But that was, maybe an aspiration that was not actualized. The reality is the black male is more diminished now than perhaps at any time, at least in our memory. Now, the sociological and political economic reality is, and I would just, the diminished black male. Now, this suggests to me that patriarchy has not, will not, and cannot operate to free or empower black men. Any discussion of it, any sense of it, we got to get back to our traditional family ways and all that bullshit. Let's be real. That's mythology, and and if we knew how to be a man and all this bullshit. The other thing, since patriarchy is a set of institutions linked to, embedded with private property, neoliberal capitalism, and the capitalist state, the government, patriarchy as an institution is not just a male, a white male, preserved. As I said earlier, most white women in positions of power, heading institutions of the state, of the government, of powerful universities, of banks, of corporations, are not adverse to patriarchy. In other words, an institution can be led by women, 50% women at the top, and still be patriarchal.